oblivious to the pressures, the budget pressures, and the fiscal crisis that we're in. I don't know where you've been, so most of the people in here understand it. But what do you consider the greatest risk if the Coast Guard doesn't get their act together?
First of all, as we've noted, I think one of the important things is that you want to have a program that the acquisition director can execute. To do that, you have to make sure that your planned resources are going to marry up with that acquisition strategy. If you don't have that, you're going to have situations where every year you start changing your programs to compensate for, say, this unrealistic planning. I think that's a big start of trying to address this issue personally. I think it is a good thing that they're doing the types of analysis that they're doing with their fleet mix analysis. It's a continuous effort, I believe, on their part. What we've been talking about here, though, is in the current fiscal constraints, it seems reasonable that you'd also consider some of the trade-offs and just some scenarios if you don't get the money you need. So you can start looking ahead and thinking how you're going to react. As the Admiral Currier mentioned, he says it's very expensive to keep the legacy fleet operating. And you got to constantly make those trades between sustaining the old and acquiring the new. And I think, you know, the budget and the connection with the acquisition strategy is a key component of that.
Thank you. Admiral Currier, Chairman Mica and I requested the fleet mix analysis 14 months ago, and we still haven't received it. At our hearing last month, Admiral Papp promised us he would provide a timetable on when we would receive the document. We've not received the timetable. When will we receive the cost-constrained fleet mix analysis?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. The Phase 1 of the fleet mix analysis that was just mentioned by Mr. Hutton, which is basically a survey from a threshold to an objective of what our fleet could be, and supports, by the way, the program of record, has been submitted to the Department for review. Phase 2 of that will be completed this summer. Phase 2 is the overlay that gives the costed aspects of the fleet so that we can develop a more complete picture of what our needs might be. But I want to reiterate, fleet mix analysis number 1, much of the data of which is in the GAO report that was delivered today, shows a threshold, which is the program of record, out to an objective which expands the Coast Guard asset base to more completely satisfy the 11 statutory missions that we're charged with. Specifically to your point, Fleet Mix Analysis 1 is in review at the Department. We are using all of our capabilities to ensure that it's expeditiously reviewed and that it's provided to you, sir. I'm unable to do that directly at this time. Fleet Mission Analysis 2, Phase 2 costed will be completed this summer and submitted this summer to the Department for review as a complete package.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that, but here's a little tip. When a request is made and 14 months go by and we really don't hear anything, this is not a good thing. And when the Commandant makes a statement and we still don't have what the Commandant told us we would get, that's a problem. So there needs to be, at the very least, an improved level of communications so that we can understand what you're doing or why we're not getting something. And I know we're trying not to be unreasonable here, but from our perspective, with your biggest cheerleaders, it appears we are being ignored. A couple more questions before I turn it over to Mr. Larson. Assuming the FY 2011 appropriations become available, as we expect they will be at the end of this week, when will the Coast Guard sign a contract for NCS number 5?
Sir, if the appropriation is approved and we receive the money, we could award the contract for NSC 5, the production contract for NSC 5, in the 4th quarter this summer, fourth quarter of the fiscal year this summer, late in the summer. We have the proposal in hand, and we've already started close review.
Thank you. The NCS was designed and built to carry out as many as 4 vertical takeoff and unmanned aerial vehicles. We talked about that. It was expected to extend the range and effectiveness. We talked about that. A variety of other things that it was designed to replace and enhance the capabilities. How do you justify the cost of the National Security Cutter if, according to the Inspector General, it's only providing a similar level of capability as the vessel it is replacing?
Thank you for that question, sir. Plain talk, National Security Cutter is much more capable in its current state than the High Endurance Cutter ever was. Its ability to carry an H-60 aircraft, vice H-65s, its ability to carry 2 H-65 aircraft when required, its electronic detection suite, its radars, all of its detection and electronic suite make this ship much more effective than the current assets that we have. We won't achieve full potential of this ship until we get unmanned aerial vehicles and a proper regime of maritime patrol overhead to maximize the capabilities of the ship. But currently, as it sits in the water, it is significantly more capable than the high-endurance cutters that we have today.
Okay, thank you. I carry 2 classes of stern-launched small boats, each with a different size and capability to improve their range and effectiveness. The larger of the 2, the Long-Range Interceptor, did not perform as required, and the smaller boat, the Over-the-Horizon, had to be modified to perform correctly. The service recently solicited industry for a solution to replace both classes of small boats. Meanwhile, the NSC cannot operate at full capability, especially without the Long-Range Interceptor. When does the Coast Guard anticipate going to full production for both classes of cutter boats, and when will the NSC be outfitted with these boats?
Thank you, sir, for that question. I think that this actually is a success story of not only modernization but our setup with our integrated acquisition directorate. Whereas we had 3 classes of cutters produced by 3 different manufacturers or builders, we were going to have likely 3 different kinds of small boats or more. What we've done is we've consolidated requirements, and we've come up with a plan to only acquire a 7-meter cutter boat and an 11-meter cutter boat. The 11-meter cutter boat will be the Long-Range Interceptor that is on the National Security Cutter. The 7-meter cutter boat will fit the National Security Cutter, the Offshore Patrol Cutter, and the Fast Response Cutter. We think this makes perfect sense from a logistics perspective on commonality of parts and support. In the interim, with the National Security Cutters that are currently underway, they have a complement of boats. We have a Mark IV interceptor boat, a short-range boat that's on board there that is very similar to what we use in our 270-foot cutters. And we have an additional interceptor boat that came from the 123, the 123-foot cutters that, as you know, have been decommissioned. So both National Security Cutters that are underway have a complement of boats, but they are not the complement of boats that we will provide to them once we achieve the standard cutter boats in the 7 and 11-meter class. The 7-meter class will be tested this summer. We look for a contract award late this fiscal year, and the 11-meter small boat will be further tested in the fall of this year. So we're very close to achieving commonality in cutter boats across the classes.
Thank you. Only 3 of the services fleet 10 378-foot high-endurance cutters is currently operational. The fleet is only achieving 75% of their targeted days away from home port, and at the same time, its operating costs are more than 300% over budget. The service recently spent more than $4 million to complete emergency repairs to 2 of these vessels, and the Coast Guard has not budgeted for an HEC sustainment program for the next 5 years. 2 years ago, the Coast Guard assured the subcommittee, it was conducting a condition survey of the HEC fleet. Can you tell me if I'm wrong in that no survey was ever conducted? Was a survey ever conducted?
Yes, sir. A survey was conducted.
It was conducted.
Yes, sir. There are, if I could just explain that 1 second, there are various levels of engineering survey that have taken place. A basic engineering survey of the HEC fleet took place to start to determine which cutters would be taken out of service first. An engineering study with more fidelity is currently ongoing, but our strategy with the HEC is this. We're going to maintain that cutter to the minimal level that it's safe to operate. The cost curves on the HEC, as you've pointed out, are going exponential on us. This is an old 40-year-old ship. It's very complex, and we've used it hard. We're going to maintain this ship until we replace it with our NSCs, but we're going to do it to a level that it's safe to operate and effective to operate, but no more than that. And I think that's the best answer for the taxpayer.
I appreciate that. That's kind of good news and bad news. It's good news you did the survey. It's bad news because we got a communications problem. We need to find out. I'd like you to check and see when that was given to the committee and how it might have been communicated to the committee, because we're sort of operating in the dark that we've ever received it.
Yes, sir, we'll do.
One other question before I'll turn it back over to Mr. Larson. On the Maritime Patrol aircraft, to date the Coast Guard has taken delivery of 11 HC-144 Maritime Patrol aircraft and 12 mission system pallets. The service plans to acquire a total of 36 aircraft. The program is currently 30% over budget and 5 years behind schedule. In addition, even though the service has taken delivery of a third of its planned buy, the service has not yet begun operational testing and evaluation of the Maritime Patrol aircraft. Can you tell us why the service has acquired nearly half of its planned Maritime Patrol aircraft and has still not begun an operational test and evaluation phase, or are we wrong and you have conducted it?
Well, sir, the Maritime Patrol aircraft was originally initiated, the contracting was initiated through our lead systems integrator that we've replaced. Organically, we are the lead systems integrator. There was a shift in contracting. There was a shift now we buy directly from the manufacturer with a direct contract. That shift caused a price increase in that how we consider costing that aircraft as we got more fidelity with actuals and we added other things in like logistics, the logistics tail that hadn't been adequately considered by the previous LSI. It drove a cost increase. We're not seeing per se a unit cost increase in the price of the aircraft. We've just recosted it to adequately treat logistics. And I think that's an explainable cost bump in what you've seen in our projections in the out years. As far as operational test and evaluation, from the first aircraft we received, we started operational assessment. Now, we've been in limited rate production, and we went to the department with a production decision, and it was decided that we need to complete a fuller OT&E prior to getting to decision level 3 or full rate production decisions. So we have been in limited rate production, but we've had an ongoing operational assessment for the whole life of this asset. I think that we've shown how effective it is. Deepwater Horizon, the case I described in Miami in my opening statement. So what our plan is this. We're in limited rate production. We will complete a formal OT&E, operational test and evaluation period, this summer, and then we will go back for a full production decision in the fall, or ADE3 we call it, and we'll be in full production status. I don't anticipate a problem in OT&E because of the scope of the operational assessment that's taken place through the delivery and the implementation of the first airframes.
Well, I hope you're right, because if you switch seats and you're on the subcommittee up here and you're hearing that there's no formal test and evaluation and you've bought a whole lot of assets and something doesn't isn't right down the line. We had a situation in the past that didn't go so well with assets that were purchased, and then there's litigation and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, I hope you're right.
Sir, the operational test that's gone on, I can attest to you that the fidelity of the operational assessment from an operational perspective shows this aircraft with great promise. And throughout the entire scope of this assessment, there have been changes and upgrades and modifications to the mission pallet system at the expense of the contractor that have brought this thing to a mature state. What will be further testing in formal OT&E are the logistics, maintenance, and all the peripheral things that go with it as a system. I don't anticipate a problem there.
Okay. Mr. Larson.